The Washington Post, where democracy dies in sanctimonious virtue posturing, has issued new guidelines to its reporters in a pamphlet entitled Why It's President Trump's Fault. WAPO editor Wendy Nudnik said he distributed the pamphlet because several Post reporters were laboring under the misapprehension that some negative things that happened in the country could not be blamed on President Trump. Nudnik said he wanted to correct that impression so the paper could once again become the go-to source for uninformed leftists with underlying mental health issues. Here's a brief excerpt from the pamphlet. Quote, "When a lunatic who supports the president mails bombs to the president's opponents, that is the president's fault because the lunatic supports the president. When a lunatic who hates the president murders people, that is the president's fault because the president is an evil Adolf Hitler-like monster who uses harsh political rhetoric that creates a climate of violence. When a lunatic shoots journalists because of a long-standing personal grudge going back to 2011, that is President Trump's fault because President Trump is mean to journalists who are wonderful and very important people charged by the Constitution with informing the public when President Trump is literally acting like Hitler with his harsh rhetoric criticizing journalists. When there's a devastating hurricane, that is President Trump's fault because he doesn't accept climate change, which Hitler wouldn't do also if he were here, instead of sending President Trump to do his evil work of harshly criticizing journalists. When I was 11 and my mother blamed me for breaking her favorite lamp, even after I told her it was the dog, that was President Trump's fault because I'm sure he called my mother and ratted me out because that's what Hitler would do." Unquote. In a statement to his staff, Mr. Nudnik said he felt it was urgent to issue the new guidelines because the Washington Post had recently descended into laughable partisan hackery that made a mockery of real journalism, which he said was President Trump's fault. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, ipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
All right, I am back. What a horrible Klavanless weekend, man. I leave for a couple of days. I mean, what can you people not hold this country together in my absence for just a few days? However, the good news is tomorrow is the mailbag. And so all your problems, political, religious, personal, they will all be solved if you subscribe for a lousy $10 a month or a lousy $100 for the entire year. And then go on the Daily Wire website, dailywire.com, hit the podcast button, hit the Andrew Klavan podcast, hit the mailbag symbol, ask your question. Any question you want, all answers guaranteed 100% correct and will change your lives. Maybe for the better. I don't know. Gosh, I'll do my best. So what can I say? But anyway, we will get through the aftermath of this horrible Klavanless weekend. But first, let's talk about your underwear. By golly, that's what I know. I know you're all thinking about it. So let's talk about it. Pair of Thieves, terrific. You know what? I flew to New York. I wore my Pair of Thieves underwear in the plane because you're sitting for so long. I wanted to be super comfortable. These things are so comfortable. I'm now supposed to tell you about the proprietary moisture wicking fabric that keeps you cool and fresh. Like you care what they're made. Yes, well, good. Next time I make my underwear. Well, you don't have to make your underwear. Just get your Pair of Thieves underwear. One of the guys who started the Pair of Thieves says all his wife ever wants to see is him in his pair of super fit briefs, and his wife is Jessica Alba. So if you want Jessica Alba chasing you down the street, trying to look at your underwear, Pair of Thieves is where you want to go. For a limited time, this month only, our listeners get 20% off their first order at pairofthieves.com/Klavan. Get 20% off when you go to pairofthieves.com/Klavan. This month only, pairofthieves.com/Klavan. You will be so comfortable. You will say to yourself, how do you spell Klavan? It's Klavan. There's no E's in Klavan. I just make it look easy. That's it. One of the questions I used to get, I just told Rob, our producer, just told me today that we have a policy of not naming the evildoers who do terrible things to people, so we don't give them publicity. I didn't know that, but I had already stopped doing it. And one of the reasons I stopped doing it, as a crime writer, when I go around, to crime writing conferences or just to any kind of thing where there were fans, one of the questions they would ask me more often than any other was, why are villains more interesting than heroes? And, if you think about it, you see things like, I don't know, a Nightmare on Elm Street, and everybody puts a picture of, what was his name, Freddy something or other, with the thing, Frankenstein, you think about the monster. The villains of things become icons, and sometimes the heroes don't. And they would say, well, why are villains more interesting than heroes? And I would always say it's because we lie about heroes, but we tell the truth about villains. We tell the truth about all the villains' faults, all his human longings, all the things that became twisted in him. They become representative of things that are in us that are twisted in us. So we recognize ourselves in the villain. But if we told the truths about heroes, which is what I've been trying to do for my whole career, they become far more interesting. I've written books like True Crime where the villain doesn't even exist. You don't even know who the villain is. You just know about the hero because the hero is so interesting because I tell you all his flaws. And that actually became, over time, that became kind of standard in TV when you had stories like Sopranos and Breaking Bad where the hero would act and the villain would be the same guy. But that's not what I was talking about. What I was talking about was good guys, people who were good guys, but they were flawed. Maybe they cheated on their wives. Maybe they drank too much. Maybe they lied. They did all the things that people do, but they were still good guys because they took that path. And the thing is, good guys are unique because each one of us has a path to decency that is different from every other. So it's really the good guy who is more interesting if you are willing to overcome the audience's unwillingness to see his flaws. If you force the audience to look at his flaws and they see, oh, he became a hero even though he wasn't perfect, even though he had all these flaws. Because really, bad guys are like the devil's NPCs. They're the non-playable character. They're the faceless legions of evil who all do the same damn thing. They all say the same damn thing. Whenever they contact me, I hear, whenever I hear from the anti-Semites, they all have that same snickering little demonic giggle, and they all have found some line in the Bible that they think justifies their nastiness, and they have some set of facts. It's always the same. But I find it, we have to talk, of course, about anti-Semitism when you have a killing like the one they had in Pittsburgh. But the thing that I'm finding so hard right now, and I'm sure this is true of you too, is I'm finding it hard to find out what's not happening in America, okay? What is not happening in America? We know things that are happening. We know there was terrible shooting. We know before that loon was sending out bombs to Democrats and anti-Trump people. But what is not happening? Are we in the midst of a surge of anti-Semitism, a surge of hatred, a surge of violence? Is that really what's going on? I really do not believe that. I do not believe that. There's this poll from, I don't know, it's one of the, I guess it's the Anti-Defamation League. They've sent out this thing saying, oh, anti-Semitic violence has skyrocketed in the last year. And the whole point of it is to get Trump. It's just to say, oh, how terrible Trump is, and Trump is inciting violence. The stats they use are very, very suspect. The stats they use are very suspect. They count all kinds of things. They talk about this shooting in Pittsburgh as if we haven't had shootings. We've had plenty of shootings in Jewish neighborhoods before, in Jewish facilities. This guy, had the luck of the devil, and he killed more people than some of these other shooters have. But that's just, that's the way these things break. But we have had this stuff before. The problem we're having is this system we have fallen into. You all know it. We all know it's true. The system we have fallen into of trying to pin evil actions on whatever it is we don't like in life. It's video games. I don't like video games. I don't like the Second Amendment, so it must be the Second Amendment. I don't like President Trump, so it's all President Trump. And yes, do I believe the left does this more? Yes, because I believe the left controls more of the narrative than we do. The left controls more the networks, entertainment, academia. So yes, they do it more, but we do it too. And we start answering, well, you didn't blame Obama when the 5 cops were killed in Dallas and all this stuff. And look, we degrade ourselves. I mean, for a while, and I talked about this while it was happening, that guy, Anthony Jeselnik, remember he had that show called Thoughts and Prayers, and he made a joke about how thoughts and prayers don't mean anything. And suddenly it was wrong to send thoughts and prayers. I mean, how low does your national conversation have to sink before you can't send thoughts and prayers to strangers who are heartbroken? There's nothing else you can do for them, so you do that. So look, I don't want to play down the evil of anti-Semitism. I don't want to say that we're not angry at one another. We are angry at one another. There's a lot of anger in the streets when you have politicians being chased out of restaurants, and you have, people going on TV and saying, that we should do more of this. We should get in people's faces. When you have the TV station telling you that because a woman accused a man of sexual malfeasance, if you don't believe her, you're not believing all women. That kind of madness, that insane level of debate where if you don't agree with something, suddenly, I hear people saying, oh, if you hate George Soros, you're anti-Semitic. Like George Soros, who has done everything he can to destroy the state of Israel, to destroy America, but he happens to be racially Jewish. It's not like he's going to shul. The guy, has nothing to do with being actually Jewish. He just is racially Jewish. So if you don't like George Soros, now suddenly you're contributing to anti-Semitic violence. And the left politicizes everything. They do. They politicize everything. But let's just stop for a minute and talk about what's not happening. Remember, they had that poll. Some organization called More in Common had that study called Hidden Tribes, where they came out and said the thing that headlined the news about it in the right-wing press was that people hated political correctness. Everybody was talking about people hated political correctness. But buried in there, too, was this fact that 25% of Americans are traditional conservatives. 25%. That's a quarter, 1 in 4 Americans are traditional conservatives. 8% are progressives. Everybody else doesn't want to belong to any group, is willing to compromise, is happy to talk. They called them the exhausted majority. That makes, so just doing it, that's 33, 67%. That's what I always say. I always say 70% of America could come to terms about 70% of the issues, right? So we're not living in a hate-filled world. We're not living in a place where everybody is, screaming at each other and hates each other. That's not what's happening. Let's talk in a minute about what is. I think we have 2 real problems that we're really facing that we need to talk about that actually are happening. First, let's talk about a problem we don't have, which is having to go to the post office. Post office is great. They have so much to offer. But just like everything else in life, nobody has time to do anything. It's got to be there in your computer. You need it where you can get it fast. Stamps.com crams the post office. It's ugly, there's a little bloodshed, but they cram the post office into your computer so you can access all the amazing services of the post office right from your desk 24/7 when it's convenient for you. You can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, using your own computer and printer. The mail carrier just comes and picks it up. It is very cool. I like using it just because I like to see the envelope go into the printer and come out with a stamp on it. You just click print mail, you are done. It really is so much easier. And right now, you can use the term Klavan. You may not have heard this term before. It's Klavan for this special offer. It includes up to $55 free postage, a digital scale, and a 4-week trial. Don't wait. Go to Stamps.com. Click on the radio microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Klavan. That's Stamps.com and enter Klavan. And you send off your first letter saying, how do you spell Klavan? It's Klavan. So what is happening? 2 things. There are 2 things happening. 1, we have a problem dealing with mental illness in this country. Nobody wants to talk about it. And the reason nobody wants to talk about it is because it doesn't fuel the hate machine. It doesn't fuel the outrage machine. Outrage is what you tune in for. You tune in for outrage because outrage gives you a little chemical burst of satisfaction. Everybody wants that outrage. You want to get that outrage. We all want it. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about all of us. We all want to hear about how it's the other guy's fault and what's the stupidest thing anybody said. And by the way, we're going to get to that because a lot of stupid stuff got said. We'll talk about it. But all of these guys who have committed these acts over the years, these mass killings, almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them are mentally ill. I am not stigmatizing the mentally ill. Most mentally ill people do not commit violence. Most mentally ill people do not commit violence. But because of this reluctance to stigmatize the mentally ill, we have neglected the fact that our system for taking care, forcibly taking care of those who need care has collapsed. We no longer have asylums that we can commit people to. We can commit them. There are a few of them, but you can't get in. It's hard to get in anywhere. It's hard to get people to stay in there. Once they're in, it's hard to make sure they get treatment, to force them to get treatment. Sometimes they get committed and they don't get the treatment they need. We now have treatment that would work, that would help people. We got to get them. They think that the left does this more than the right. They think, I contacted an expert about this over the weekend. I contacted an expert, and the first thing he said to me is, he said, I'm a raving liberal, but only conservatives will talk to me. Only conservatives will talk about mental illness because we don't care about stigmatizing people because we're bums. But, we don't care. We want to say, look, this is the problem. These are the facts. Let's fix it. When you leave a mentally ill person out on the street or out free and he needs treatment, he becomes violent, he ends up in prison. Okay? He ends up in prison. That's a nightmare because, first of all, he's already done harm to somebody. That's why he's in prison. And second of all, he's not going to get the treatment he needs. We need asylums. We need a way to commit people. Every cop on the beat will tell you this is true. Every police officer will tell you. And what's so heartbreaking is the families of these people will tell you, they'll say, I knew he was violent. I knew he was going to go bad. I couldn't do anything about it. He wouldn't take the meds. He wouldn't do what he had to do. He would take them for a while and then they'd make his mind fuzzy and he'd stop taking them. They all know, we all know this needs treatment. And because the left won't stigmatize them, what they say is, well, everybody, they'll say, well, 30% of people are mentally ill. You go, what do you mean 30%? Well, they can't sleep at night. They worry too much. That's not mentally ill. It's mentally ill when you think Martians are living in your fillings and telling you to kill people. That's the kind of mental illness I'm talking about. Plenty of sane people have killed Jews because of anti-Semitism. But the guy who did this in Pittsburgh, he was also crazy. And you don't know, this is something we could work on together. You do not know. Even anybody who is anti-Semitism is a hatred of God. The reason people hate Jews is because they hate God, because God used the Jews as a doorway back into the world. They remind us of this. They have inculcated much of our moral system comes from Jewish thought. That's why we hate them. We blame them for killing Christ because they represented all of us in the Christ drama. Christ himself, a Jew. All Jews. People always quote these lines from the Bible. When I criticize America, right, I love America. I love America, but I criticize America because I love it and because we want to fix things that are wrong with it. When the Russians call me up, as they have occasionally done, and ask me to go on their TV shows, or recently I got asked to be in a documentary that was going to be made by a guy who was sympathetic to Russia and was basically being made for a Russian audience, I refused. Why? Because when I criticize America in Russia, that's saying something different. When you read the Bible and people say things about Jews, you're listening to Jews talking about Jews. That is different. It is not anti-Semitism. It is not hatefulness. When Jesus says, hey, you guys, you're messing up here, he is a Jew talking to other Jews. So don't tell me that this excuses some kind of foul hatred against Jewish people. It does not. Jesus was a Jew. Everything about Christianity blossoms out of the soil of Judaism. So, we have the second problem we have is, but what I was going to say about that was basically evil people have done things without being crazy. But this guy was crazy. We need a system for dealing with it. The other problem we have is this. 8% of people are progressive radicals. I would guess 90% of the media, maybe that's overdoing it, 85% of the media are part of that 8%. That's a problem. That should not be true. We cannot fix that by law because of the First Amendment. But listen to the garbage that was coming out after this incident in Pittsburgh. Listen to the things people say. There's this one woman, everybody's played this, but it really is worth playing. This is this GQ reporter, Julia Yoffe. Do you know how you pronounce her name? Joffe, maybe? She's Jewish. She comes out and says this about all they want to do is blame President Trump. But President Trump, by the way, the most pro-Jewish president in my lifetime, 3 Jewish grandchildren, 3 of his grandchildren are Jews, moves the embassy to Jerusalem. Bibi Netanyahu loves the guy so much, it's a little embarrassing. It's like, get a room, Bibi, of course he does. All Jews should love this guy. He's doing a great job for them. Here's what she said about him.
This president, one of the things that he really launched his presidential run on is talking about Islamic radicalization. And this president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did. I mean, the way he talks, the way he it's
the way he
talks, the way that he allows these people, the way he winks and nods to these groups, the way he says, I know I'm not supposed to say it, but I'm a nationalist, the way that he hems and haws when he has to condemn these people and kind of gritting his teeth, kind of says, fine, okay, I condemn this, but then, and all
Jake,
his...
for you not to push back on that.
You're about to push back on, but to
that's
bring
irresponsible. For her to say that the President of the United States has radicalized more people than ISIS is irresponsible.
Now, some of you may have forgotten who ISIS is because President Trump destroyed them, okay? So some of you may have forgotten, like, well, who's ISIS again? And remember, they used to have a caliphate until President Trump wiped it off the face of the earth. You know, if that's, she apologized for that in that kind of creepy little apology way they have, but it's not really an apology. But before she said that, she tweeted out, "A word to my fellow American Jews, this president makes this possible here where you live. I hope the embassy move over there where you don't live was worth it." So in other words, it's the Jews' fault for wanting the embassy to be in Jerusalem where it belongs. Today, I went out of my way not to bring in any cuts from MSNBC where they're just being absolutely disgusting, but that's not the problem. The problem is not MSNBC. They represent the 8%. They represent that 8% progressive radicals. That's fine. They should have their stupid little television station that they can watch. I'm completely in favor of that. It's the mainstream. It's the fact that the mainstream are all saying the same thing. I brought in this montage from our pals at Newsbuster. This is Sarah Sanders. We cut her out. This is just the press hammering Sarah Sanders. Isn't it all President Trump's fault that an anti-Semite killed Jews?
But he's also harshly attacked some of the very people that received those pipe bombs. And this morning, suggesting that the news media is responsible for the anger in the country. How does he do that when, in the case of the pipe bomber, this was somebody who went to Trump rallies. This is somebody who had a van covered with attacks on the media and praise for the president. The shooter in Pittsburgh is somebody who was provoked, it seems, by the caravan that the president has spent so much time talking about. Why is he out there, when you say he's trying to unite the country, why is he out there
the very
making these attacks?
The very first thing.
But at his rallies, since the suspicious packages began being mailed, the president has called out Maxine Waters by name at his rallies. He stood there as his supporters chant "Lock her up" in reference to Hillary Clinton. He continues to call crooked Hillary Clinton. Will the president stop using that kind of language in light of the fact that these individuals were targeted?
Shouldn't you reserve the term enemy for people who are actually the enemy of the United States rather than journalists?
So let's remember, I always like to go back down memory lane. Let's remember what Nancy Pelosi said when the Bernie bro shot up congressmen at the Virginia ball field, right? And they asked her, they said, well, shouldn't the left tone down its rhetoric? Somebody actually had the temerity to ask Nancy Pelosi, shouldn't the left tone down its violent rhetoric? Here's her response.
I think that the comments made by my Republican colleagues are outrageous, beneath the dignity of the job that they hold, beneath the dignity of the respect that we would like Congress to command. How dare they say such a thing? How dare they? So this sick individual does something despicable, and it was horrible what he did, hateful. But for them to all of a sudden be sanctimonious as if they never seen such a thing before. And I don't even want to go into the President of the United States, but in terms of some of the language that he has used. So again, let's go there another day. But since you asked, how could they possibly say such a thing? First of all, the timing of it all. Everybody is so sad, so concerned, so coming together. Let us all take a step back, examine our own conscience, see what negative attitudes we can all curtail. But the sanctimony of it all, really?
So, the sanctimony of it all. So now we're hearing this. And, they keep saying, well, Trump is the president. Trump is the president, but the media is the media. The media is a great cloud of information, a great cloud of narrative that surrounds him. Trump is the only voice loud enough to cut through it. When he blames them, he's correct. When he says they are acting badly, he is correct. I don't particularly like the enemy of the people line either. I know he's too stubborn to ever let it go, but still, we have two problems in this country. We have lots of problems in this country, of course, because the country's filled with people. If we could just get rid of them, we wouldn't have any problems. But as long as it's filled with people, we're going to have a lot of problems. But the two big things that are going on is we have failed the mentally ill. We're leaving them out there to commit these violent acts, these mass acts of violence. We have failed them. And the other is that 8% of the people dominate the media, dominate the narrative. What's really happening in this country, if you walk out there, Look at the police. I mean, I don't even know how to talk about this. Look at the police who run into a synagogue when there's problems there, who run into a mosque if there's problems there, who run into a black neighborhood if there's problem there. Well, that 8% on the media talk about how racist they are, how racist the police are. Listen, this is a country where a handsome Dan who has never done a damn thing for anybody can pretend to be a cop and make $250,000 a week. But our real cops who make considerably less than that a year, right, show up for all of us. They show up for all of us, no matter who you are. Why? Because it's America. Because it's America. Who healed the shooter? Who healed the shooter after he went after the Jews? Jews. Jewish doctors rushed to aid him. Why? Because they're Americans. Because this is America. This is what it's like. What I saw after this atrocity, and it is an atrocity, and anti-Semitism, every time one of you guys, it's not you guys I'm talking to, but every time somebody writes me and tells me what a cuck I am for standing up for the Jews, or tells me, like, oh, this Bible line, forgives their hatred and all this stuff. Look, this is a real evil thing. It is the devil's flagpole. It always has been the way the devil announces himself with it. It's always with anti-Semitism. But what's really happening in this country is President Trump went and gave a speech after this. And whatever he says, it's not enough and it's no good and everybody's going to attack him. But he's standing in the heartland of the country. He's standing in Illinois. He's standing with a bunch of people. Some of them may have never met a Jew, and they're cheering for him. Just play what he said.
This evil anti-Semitic attack is an assault on all of us. It's an assault on humanity. It will require all of us working together to extract the hateful poison of anti-Semitism from our world. This was an anti-Semitic attack at its worst. The scourge of anti-Semitism cannot be ignored, cannot be tolerated, and it cannot be allowed to continue. We can't allow it to continue.
When I see, he went on to say, they're trying to eradicate the Jews, we're going to eradicate you, and the crowd went wild. When I see this country, this Christian country, this mainstream Christian country, and out in the middle of the country, they are cheering this president they love with his 3 Jewish grandchildren, and he's saying words like that. And I have lived in other countries, and I've been around a lot of places in the world. This is the greatest country on earth. You have won if you are here, you have won the lottery of life. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean everybody's great. It doesn't mean there's no bigotry and all this stuff, but this is an incredible country. That's what's happening here. What is happening here is America, which is a blessing. It is a blessing. So these horrible things that happen are being magnified by 8% of the country who own too much of the media. That's one thing. And we have a problem with the mentally ill, that we're not treating the mentally ill. But meanwhile, out on the streets, out in the churches, out in the temples, out in the people's homes, this is a country where people are getting along every day with people who are nothing like themselves, who are rooting for people who are nothing like themselves. And we're going to return and talk about that a little bit more at the end of the show, because some beautiful stuff happened over this weekend that got erased. It got erased by all the violence, got blown away, as it were, by all the violence. But we'll talk about it more. We're going to have David Limbaugh first. We're going to talk about him, about the resurrection. He has a new book out about the resurrection. Meanwhile, take this moment, because we got to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. Take this moment to come to dailywire.com. Subscribe for your lousy $10. Why? Because we want that $10. That's why. Because we want it. Dashiell Hammett said, things belong to people who want them most. We want your $10 more than you want your $10. You'll get Another Kingdom. The new episode of Another Kingdom is out today for subscribers. There you go, right there. The new episode of Another Kingdom is out for subscribers. By the way, while I'm talking about this, if you want to pre-order the book of the first season of Another Kingdom, you can do that on Amazon, and you get all kinds of goodies, gifts. You get a prequel that I wrote that is exclusive to pre-orders if you pre-order it now, and they finally got it discounted a little bit on Amazon, so that's good. Go and do that as well. But subscribe, and then you can be in the mailbag tomorrow, and you won't have any problems because I'll solve them all. I mean, how easy is that? Come on over to dailywire.com.